Let's bring in our chief foreign affairs correspondent and the moderator of Face the Nation, Margaret Brennan, who joins me here in Washington. Great to see you. CBS has reported today that the president has been briefed on the risks and benefits of potentially attacking the Fordo nuclear site there in just about 60 miles southwest of Tehran, including, taking that facility out with whatever it would take. What are the risks being weighed right now by the White House as they consider this?
Well, it is so interesting you put your finger on the hurry up and wait nature of this. If this was an immediate emergency, it couldn't wait 2 weeks, right?
Right.
So when we look at that question of Fordo and what was happening there, this is deep underground mountain terrain. The facilities that could only be taken out, U.S. military assessments are by the kind of bunker buster bomb the United States has, Israel doesn't. But what beyond that? When the U.S. gets involved, what are the second and third order effects of that? That's what diplomats are talking about here, which is to say the Israeli prime minister may not be worried about what happens next, but the United States, if they get directly involved, may have to be.
Yeah.
If you kill the supreme leader, for example, and there's a power vacuum, if there's an infighting there that happens, what is the next stage here? Who secures the nuclear sites and the nuclear material? IAEA inspectors from the UN are already in the country, but can they actually do it on their own without support? What are the impacts on the allies in the region? So it's not just a one and done scenario. And that's one of the things that has been talked about in the past few days. And I am told that is one of the things that diplomats really want to talk through here. We know that today the UK Foreign Secretary was meeting with Secretary of State Rubio at the White House about this sort of last-ditch proposal the United States is putting forward for a direct negotiation. The Italian foreign minister announced that the U.S. wants direct talks. So President Trump is still giving diplomacy a shot, even if the Israeli prime minister thinks he's getting strung along. There are those who question whether the Israeli prime minister's jamming Donald Trump.
Exactly, yeah. Now, we know the president approved some kind of military operations on Tuesday night. Do we have any sense of what that includes, what it would involve?
Well, our James Laporta has done some great reporting on this, along with Ellie Watson, to talk about the assets that are being moved into the region. But you need more than just refueling equipment to carry out the kind of attack to take out Fordo. The B-2 bombers, our last reporting is that they have not been moved into the region. They would fly from various positions, one of them just about 6 hours away in the Indian Ocean. But in terms of that detail, what matters here is giving the president military options also underscores the diplomatic way out, because the best chance at diplomacy is when it's backed by that credible use of force. And that threat is building for President Trump should he choose to take it. But he's clearly hoping he won't have to.
Yeah.
And you have these talks in Geneva tomorrow led by European ministers who are really trying to help the United States find an off-ramp.
But the latest guidance we have is that Steve Witkoff, the Mideast envoy, is not going to those meetings, right?
That's the latest guidance we have. He has been reaching out to the Iranian foreign minister. I'm told through Iranian officials it's very hard just to get signals working, frankly, on international calls and uplinks. We don't even know how the Iranian foreign minister is going to manage to make it to Geneva, get through airspace at this point. But that's why it's so important to watch what happens with the UK foreign secretary, who was here in the United States and now flying directly to Geneva. Does he have a U.S. proposal in his pocket? Is he actually going to be the messenger on behalf of the United States? The UK likes to often think of themselves as that. Yep. So we will have to watch Geneva, not just for what the Europeans negotiate, but if it gives a sense of the diplomacy the U.S. could put forward. And we have some of the details of the proposals that the U.S. has put forward.
And it basically, bottom line is no more nuclear enrichment. Is that even viable to most of the world?
Well, the nuclear enrichment they have now, the United States is saying absolutely not. And if you want a civilian nuclear program, you're going to have to buy the enriched stuff from elsewhere. And Iran hasn't agreed to that. But there are many different ways to get to this kind of compromise agreement. The Omanis had proposed, putting a facility in a consortium in an area where other Arab states also used it. Is there a way to have the Iranians save face, to say, we still have a nuclear program, we weren't bombed to submission? But it gets us back to that other tension here between the United States and Israel. It seems in many ways the Israeli government is pushing for regime change. And there are concerns in the region of what that would look like if it is instigated from the outside, and what else it would mean, and if tomorrow looks any different. And by the way, does this cause a sprint towards creating the bomb that the U.S. says they hadn't created?
To begin with, yeah. Well, we'll be watching Geneva. I know you'll be watching it. And of course, you'll have more Sunday on Face the Nation. And in the coming days, Margaret Brennan, thank you.